Bijan Robinson is on the verge of taking over as the best fantasy player in the NFL, while Drake London looks to finish as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver in back-to-back seasons. We dig into the top 3 storylines for the Atlanta Falcons entering 2025 in today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
We are going through all 32 NFL teams and talking about their top 3 fantasy storylines entering the 2025 season. We are on to the NFC South this week, and we have one team left. It's the Atlanta Falcons, and they have a very interesting storylines because they may roster the best fantasy player in the NFL because Bijan Robinson, he's right there. He's right there on the cusp. I feel like he had the most secret 1900 scrimmage yard season in all of history without being like overhyped here. And then we have Drake London, who broke out last season, but he has to play with Michael Penix Jr., who can he officially prove he deserves to be a starting quarterback in the league? And can he prove he can be a good fantasy quarterback? So those are all the things we need to dig into today. Let's start with Bijan Robinson because right now he's sitting at number 2 running back off the board for fantasy drafts behind Saquon Barkley, and number 3 overall right now behind just Saquon Barkley and Jamar Chase. So what are your feelings about Bijan Robinson? Because do you think he can officially break out where he is far and above every other running back that you could take?
Now, it really comes down to, is he going to jump up from RB4? And related to that, will Jamar Chase and Saquon Barkley slip a little bit? And Saquon Barkley had a superb season with the 2,000 yards. He also had Jamar Chase win the Triple Crown. Now, these things are very hard to duplicate if you're fantasy performers, if you're reality performers. It's really hard to go and do that. Now, Bijan Robinson, he was helped. We saw this coming right with Zach Robinson and this new Falcons offense. We didn't have to worry about Tyler Algier again. He knew what he was doing without Arthur Smith in there, and you really saw what Bijan should have been like early. Remember that Michelle, if you were a longtime listener of the show, you'll know that Michelle took him first or was thinking about him first as a rookie. She was just a little bit ahead because, unfortunately, we did not factor in how bad the play calling and usage would be of a high-drafted running back such as Bijan Robinson. But now the usage is fine. The production is there. Everything is lining up here. And there's a case now that we think about. Can he put up more numbers that are pleasing and then add up to giving us more than Chase and Barkley can? The answer is yes, because they need to do this a little bit more. The youth movement is now complete. The missing part was the quarterback. They have him now in Michael Penix Jr., so we expect him to have a good year. And that comes with leaning on Bijan Robinson, taking pressure off him quite a bit. The offensive line did take a hit with Drew Dahlman gone. That's a big one for the run blocking. But this Falcons team overall is set up well to be successful on the ground. They're really good with Bijan as a security blanket potentially because Penix, look, he's an athletic quarterback, but he didn't really run. That wasn't his jam at Indiana or Washington. I don't think he wants to do that. A left-handed guy wants to dump it off, has a big arm, so you think people are going to worry about things that are downfield, especially when you have a Drake London. So that's going to open up things for the short to intermediate routes, and that's why you can look at Robinson being a big, big factor because of his receiving ability. And Jahmyr Gibbs has that. Coincidentally, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley, and Jahmyr Gibbs, they're in the tier 1 of running backs right now when you break it up in the ranking. So why is that? Because they all can be special in the passing game and scoring to really separate. Now, he's ahead of some interesting guys, Michelle. Jahmyr Gibbs is one of them, Ashton Genty, Derrick Henry, Devin Achane, and Christian McCaffrey. So you look at those guys and say, yeah, Robinson is definitely going to get the key volume. He's established. He's in a good scheme. And he's going to get what he needs to put those big numbers up. So I have no problems for anybody that wants to take Bijan Robinson, defy looking at Barkley and Chase and going there, I think you can actually get that return from him this season.
Yeah, I'm absolutely fine with him being the 101 over anyone else. He was a running back 4 last year, but that was with a bad start to the season. And he had a new coach, tougher schedule. Tyler Algier was still a little bit involved too, and annoying. But then it just completely flipped the switch, and he became exactly what he thought he could be. From week 6 through 18 last year, he averaged 21 fantasy points per game in half PPR. That was the most among all running backs. That was more than Jahmyr Gibbs. That was more than Saquon Barkley, who was absolutely amazing. I mean, not much more. Saquon was at 20.5 points per game. But again, Bijan, 21 points per game. 3 more points per game to Derrick Henry during that span. Like, I do think he is right there, ready to just average that for a whole season. And when you look at Jamar Chase, absolutely amazing. And you could take him and be happy with the 101. He had 17 receiving touchdowns last year, right? And 1,700 receiving yards. Now, he's absolutely amazing, and he could repeat that probably, or maybe, not probably. But the 17 receiving touchdowns, like that's just very, very unlikely to even come close to that. And he still only averaged, not only, but 20 fantasy points per game. And again, Bijan from week 6 through 18 was at 21. So I do think this is the year where Bijan Robinson becomes exactly what everyone thought he was going to be, and is just an absolute monster, league-winning type running back that's just destroying leagues. And I mentioned this at the top. He put up 1,900 scrimmage yards last year. It was 1,887, 15 touchdowns, 365 touches. And I feel like everyone kind of thought it was overall, like, not disappointing, but like he could have done more, right? And it's already that good. I don't know. I'm really excited for what he can do.
Yeah, and I think part of it is Saquon Barkley had a big year. They won the Super Bowl, and he came through on his birthday and had all the things going on with the momentum and the popularity. Like, it seemed like he was the only running back that people were into, even with Derrick Henry doing his thing. That kind of Saquon Barkley stole the running back headlines, even with all the other free agent backs doing well. And Bijan playing in Atlanta does not help. They weren't a playoff team. All that stuff is there. Then Chase, of course, took over and kind of accelerated into really offensive player of the year conversation. I mean, Bijan should have been there. But again, you play the Falcons, you're going to have to do something majorly big, like a Matt Ryan, like 2016 season, to get on the radar, to get MVP or offensive player of the year consideration. So I think he'll be fine, and he'll get fed a lot. Again, Penix, they can't have him drop back and just take all those hits. They need to be smart about it, and Robinson is the guy to take all the pressure off, either by just straight up running the ball and setting up play action downfield, or just being an outlet for him in the passing game. So that's why I like him, because, again, you have Chase and Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb, as well as those running backs. Well, I think Bijan can be great as a receiver to rack up enough receptions to justify that, and then the touchdowns and the running. So, again, it seems like it's pretty tight, but it just means I would go leaning toward a running back here early, because I think there's a little bit better cost at wide receiver later, where I think you won't get special guys like Bijan or Gibbs or Barkley if you come back around and don't jump on them early.
Yeah, and the further we get into this offseason, the further, like, I know if I'm in the draft and I'm looking, if I'm at the 101, I'm probably just going to take Bijan Robinson. But if I'm not and I'm at the 102 and Jamar Chase goes, like, there's not a question in my mind that Bijan's going to be my top running back I'm going to go with. Yeah. I know it sounds crazy over what Saquon Barkley did last year, but I'm still going to go with Bijan Robinson and just be happy with my pick there. But we are going to get into the discussion about Drake London, right? Because he broke out last year. Fantastic. He was the wide receiver 5 total, but his average scoring says something a little bit different. Right. And he is very highly ranked. So we're going to discuss Drake London and what we expect from him next year right after a quick break. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Gametime app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. I promise you, if you go look for tickets across all apps, Gametime is going to have the cheapest tickets, the cheapest fees, and it's going to just be a very easy process for you as well. You get a view of your seat before you buy, so there's no surprises when you arrive. It takes seconds to buy tickets, 2 taps and you're set. And then they have the best ticket coverage in the business in case anything goes wrong. So you get to take the worries and the guessing work out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Right now, Drake London is ranked as a wide receiver 10 in consensus rankings. Now, he was the wide receiver 5 in total points and half PPR last season. Wide receiver 14, though, in average points per game. And he did have a couple games in there that kind of really skews his overall total points and average points per game. Well, really just total points, but he had that massive week 5 game against the Buccaneers where he put up 154 yards and a touchdown. And then he had those massive 2 last games, but really that last one against the Panthers with 187 yards and 2 touchdowns with 18 targets. And it's like, okay, the rest of the games were all, I mean, those were his only 3 100 yards games. Those 2 games that I just brought up were his only big 20 plus fantasy point games of the season. Actually, the only fantasy points of 17 plus games of the season. So I don't know if he's worth wide receiver 10 value.
Yeah, that's a fair question to ask. I mean, there is a variable in this offense now, but I will say this: 2 of those games that came were at the end of the season, back to back, and who was the quarterback was Michael Penix. So. And Michael Penix, by the way, when he went 706 in the penultimate game, then the finale 187-2, he had a combined 31 targets in those games. So what does that say? Michael Penix has one trusted guy, and that's what you do if you're a younger quarterback or rookie, right? They want him ideally to spread the ball around, but there are some things here that say he can do this and deliver at this level. I mean, if he's going to get that type of target volume, then Penix and him can have a lot of success. And I don't know if Kirk Cousins was all that great for Drake London. Like, he was okay, and he had the games where he would take advantage. But Darnell Mooney was favored a lot by Kirk Cousins in a lot of situations. And Mooney right now is ranked wide receiver 49. By the way, he was the last wide receiver 3 on the board in total points last year in half-point PPR, wide receiver 36, wide receiver 31 on average. So we're dropping him 18 spots. And I think this is a lot tied to the quarterback change where, again, Cousins and Mooney might have had a thing going, and the way he was getting open, he was more of the veteran presence now. And again, I don't know if they were ever on the same page. They might have gotten better in this offseason while Cousins was on the bench with him in London. But right now, Penix in London seems to be the combination that's going to kind of stir the rest of this offense. So really low for Darnell Mooney. He's 49. You have Kyle Pitts, our no longer favorite or draftable tight end. He's down at 18 after having a tight end 21 average season last year. So think about the drop-off to both those guys. You have a tight end 21. You have the wide receiver 49, and then you got a bunch of dudes like Kadero Hodge and these other guys ranked. So it really drops off, which tells me this. The target volume is going to stay incredibly high with Drake London. This defense still needs to get better. They're really desperate to get a pass rush. So there's going to be high passing volume with Penix. So I think he can come through as wide receiver 10, and maybe we're sleeping on that. I mean, he's a big dude who catches the balls. And I think the targets are just going to be insane this year because really, I don't know if this quarterback is going to be able to trust anyone else consistently.
Yeah, I will say that week 18 game where he had the 18 targets, Darnell Mooney did not play in that game. He was hurt. He was out. So that was a big part of it, right? But when you look at week 16 and 17, Darnell Mooney had 6 targets in week 16, kind of normal for him, but lower than what he was having with Kirk Cousins. 5 receptions, 82 yards. That's pretty good. The second game with him wasn't very good. 5 targets, 2 receptions, 37 yards. I do agree that like Drake London's going to get a ton of targets and be very, very good. It's just that last game there really worries me that people are going to overdraft him because of how good it was. Yeah. And Michael Penix Jr. was in his 3rd ever start. He leaned on his top guy, especially with Darnell Mooney out, and Kyle Pitts stinks. And that's just what he had to do. Now, Bijan Robinson in the games with Michael Penix Jr. was absolutely absurdly great as well. So we could see a lot of running, a lot of touchdowns from Bijan. That's why we love him too. A lot of targets to Bijan because Michael Penix Jr. is a statue back there. And I do think Drake London's going to have a good season. It's just I don't think he's worth wide receiver 10 cost with the number of big games he has shown us just aren't there. They're very few, rare and few in between. And like you got Jackson Smith-Njigba, who's going to be a clear cut. So is Drake London, but Jackson Smith-Njigba, I just feel like will be more consistent. You have T. Higgins, who is just more consistently gives you those bigger games. And then Mike Evans, I feel like Mike Evans and Drake London are very similar in the way, but Mike Evans' big games, I do think come more often, and his low games are just like Drake London. So there's a lot of guys going after Drake London that I actually would prefer.
Yeah, the things you mentioned a little bit were interesting because you talked about some more quarterback reliability, there will be more volatility. Maybe the teams that came in and saw Penix start late last season were still getting used to it, didn't have a lot on him maybe, so that could change things up. This offense still got some volatility here if we're not 100% sure what we'll get from Penix. So there is that factor. Again, we'll see about Mooney if he can get on the same page with Penix, but I just say, look, 10 is not crazy. And I would say if you draft him there, it's okay. Personally, I would not. I would more draft him a few spots later. But again, I can see the reasoning why, because the environment says it's there for a big season, especially with no one really else. So I think the key for him is going to be that consistent volume from Penix. And if he can get that average 10 targets per game, which is possible, that's a lot of targets. But when you look at it, 170, that's not terrible, right? It's still a reasonable amount where if he pushes 180 targets, he's going to have a very productive season, even with a decent catch rate.
Yeah, he is. Like, I do think he's one of the safer guys. I would just much rather prefer him to be my wide receiver 2 than my wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
With how early he's going, that's just not going to be very likely. I just need a guy that's going to have bigger upside on a week-to-week basis than Drake London. Now, you brought up Darnell Mooney at wide receiver 49. That is late. I still don't really have any desire. Now, he had some solid games with Kirk Cousins, like you mentioned, but a lot of games where he just completely disappeared. And with Michael Penix Jr. back there instead of Kirk Cousins, I'm really not interested in drafting Darnell Mooney.
Yeah, I think you just need consistency, right? That's the problem with the Falcons. They're up and down. You're talking about London big games, London not much there. You had Mooney had a couple massive games, right? And then not much in some other games and not available at the end of the season. So you want some consistency from this offense, and that goes for Robinson, London. You want this simple. Like some of these teams are the simplest ones in fantasy because feed Robinson a lot, throw London a lot, and go from there. Now, the real question, however, Michelle, is that enough to add up for Michael Penix to be a sleeper and a worthy QB2 pick in drafts late? So I think I'm not sure. And that's what we'll explore in our final segment here, especially that we've looked at a lot of similar quarterbacks.
Okay. All right, let's close today's show talking about Michael Penix Jr. because we've been hinting on him about how important it is that he takes this next step forward for this offense to hit its full potential. We only got to see him in 3 starts last season because Kirk Cousins started from weeks 1 through 15 before he got benched. Now, Kirk Cousins was really, really bad for fantasy. And Michael Penix, the first 2 games was really, really bad for fantasy at 6.4 points and 11.2. But then that last game against the Panthers, though, and their defense is terrible, he had that massive game for 25 fantasy points. So overall, in his 3 starts, he averaged 14.2 points. That was the quarterback, 18 over that 3-week span for total points. What are your thoughts on Michael Penix Jr.? I don't think he has top 12 potential because the rushing is not there at all. In his 3 starts, he had 3, 3, and 5 rushing yards. He would have to throw so many touchdowns.
Yeah, let's just go quickly down the line. I mean, we just talked about him not having a ton of weapons here, right? It's just a lot of Drake London and Bijan Robinson. Kyle Pitts, who knows if he's going to resurface, do anything of note. We talked about Mooney being very inconsistent. They didn't really upgrade anything behind Mooney. So let's look at that. So the weapon's not great. The running, not there. Then you go to J.J. McCarthy. He's a pretty good athlete. He's got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and T.J. Hawkinson. So you think checkmark McCarthy. Then you look at Bryce Young, a better runner. Now he has Tyrone McMillan, some receivers, and I wouldn't say the Falcons have that much of an edge on what the Panthers have. So you might say checkmark Bryce Young. Geno Smith even has some guys right now, right? Between Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, and of course, Ashton Jeanty. He might be a guy that you look at. So check Geno Smith. Anthony Richardson, we're going to take off the board there around.
Now, if he's the starter, I'd rather.
Yeah, if he's the starter. But for now, we'll take him off the board. But if you compare him to Penix, Richardson gives you the cheat code that Penix does not, and you'll know. So you can't also draft him over there. And Sam Darnold, look, okay, maybe we're getting somewhere here. Maybe we finally have one that might take over. But he still has Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith-Njigba on his team. And he's in a good Clint Kubiak passing offense. So when you look at scheme, weapons, all that, running, pocket passing, I don't think Michael Penix is a good value here. QB 24, like that says we're going to draft him in all Superflex 2 QB leagues. I don't see that happening, right? I mean, I don't know. I think I like the idea of Michael Penix Jr. being a fantasy sleeper. Yeah, I just don't think the execution is there. So in our minds, we're like, oh yeah, he could be good, but Cousins wasn't good last year. The numbers don't say like this is going to be a very big offense, and this is also why we like Bijan Robinson as the number one because man, there's not a lot here. So again, sorry I'm getting too excited about this. I don't want to bring down Michael Penix Jr., but again, we don't want to waste a draft pick either, right? We're not going to waste a draft pick here. We told you that Bryce Young has more upside. We broke that down for you. So I'm saying no. You can't look at it. He's not a guy that I'm going to target in drafts. I just want him to facilitate London, facilitate Robinson. I'll be happy with that. But a standalone player, no, not happening.
Yeah, the Falcons last year had the 8th most rushing attempts in the league at 495. And that's highly impressive when neither of their quarterbacks rushed like whatsoever in Kirk Cousins or Michael Penix Jr. So they're going to lean heavily on their running backs. They're going to hope their defense can hold up. And they're just going to ask Michael Penix to not ruin games for them, right? I think that's his goal this year, is just to show some growth, hit Drake London when you need to, and really lean on Bijan Robinson. And that, again, is why we're so incredibly high in Bijan and saying, like, he should probably just be the 101 without thought. But, yeah, even in a 2-quarterback league, I mean, I would want Michael Penix to be my 3rd quarterback, and I wouldn't even be that excited about that. But he'd just be your option for when he has a really great matchup, like the Panthers, if they're as bad as they were on defense last year. Like, that's what he should be, a streaming quarterback. But if you're in a 2-quarterback league and you take him for your 2nd quarterback, you're not able to just stream him. There's just too many other good options that you went through where they just have much higher upside, even higher floor. So we're both off Michael Penix Jr. for fantasy. That doesn't mean that Drake London can't be top 10 because the quarterbacks weren't good for fantasy last year and he was the wide receiver 5. And that doesn't mean that the offense can't be good because Bijan Robinson can carry this offense. So overall, we're excited about this Falcons offense, just not excited about Michael Penix Jr. in fantasy football. But that will be it for today's show. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We will be back on Monday discussing another division. We haven't decided yet. We're going to keep it in the air, keep you on your toes, but we will talk to you on Monday. Enjoy your weekend. Bye, y'all.